Welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. Here's an alarming fact for you. Recent survey showed 50% of senior citizens had zero savings. Zero. No money at all. So the total of expenditure, the total revenue is going to come from Social Security. And if anything happens to Social Security, those folks are in the cold. And that means there should be some plan to do some saving. Well, the president should have taken a victory lap. He won big with the Mueller report. But instead of that, he's gone into the health care, and it may be a good move, we're not sure. But Democrats are claiming the high ground in health care and are making the issue a central plank of the 2020 elections. And the president, I said, has opened the door with his latest attempt to kill Obamacare. And what happened was that a district judge ruled that the individual mandate was unconstitutional. Because there's no severability clause in that law, that would mean the entire law is out. They could have killed it with the one vote of Senator McCain, but he voted, to hurt Trump is what it amounted to. It was kind of a mean thing, but he did it. So now people are saying if you don't have a plan, you're in trouble. The House had a very good bill, and the question is what it is. So we're going to be talking to our reporter about health insurance, what is at stake, and what the plan is to make that better. John?
President Trump made a surprise turn by reigniting the Obamacare debate.
We're going to be the party of great health care, and the Democrats have let you down.
The first indication came Monday when the Justice Department agreed the Affordable Care Act is unconstitutional and should be thrown out.
Obamacare doesn't work. It's too expensive. And you take a look at everything with deductibles, it's a disaster. It's a disaster for our people. We're not going to allow it to go.
And I think what the president's doing is actually wise, which is focusing Republicans' attentions, because if it does happen and Republicans aren't ready with anything, that's when they're in trouble.
Also in trouble could be the nearly 13 million people covered under Obamacare's Medicaid expansion and 52 million people with pre-existing conditions. But the president says this move does not mean Republicans want to take away people's health care, adding that the repeal and replace plan would send grants to states for them to run their own health care insurance programs. Trump's effort to repeal Obamacare narrowly failed in the Senate back in 2017. What needs to change to pass this time around?
I think people have a lot more information and have spent a lot of time thinking about what could have gone a lot better in 2017. We have a plan that would lower health care costs and improve people's choices and make sure that we take care of the most vulnerable among us, people with pre-existing conditions.
It sounds like some Republicans aren't on board, something Marie Fishpaw of the Heritage Foundation hopes will change. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy told President Trump that his new health care push makes no sense. Do you agree?
Well, I certainly think that Republicans ran for a very long time on addressing these problems, and I'd like to think that they'll be able to do so again.
Protecting and strengthening health care is why Democrats are here on day one.
Democrats made health care a prime campaign issue during the midterms and just introduced a new bill to strengthen the Affordable Care Act. It would make more middle-class people eligible for subsidies and even help lower-income recipients already in the system.
As you remember, Senator McCain ran against Obamacare. Obamacare was extremely unpopular, and it was failing. And then it's been revived because the Republicans didn't do much about it. Ben Kennedy is joining us now from the White House. And Ben, the president has taken on a fight that maybe he's getting criticized for. You've heard maybe some reasons of why they did it. Can you tell us what you've heard?
Well, Pat, we are hearing the renewed health care debate actually began in the Oval Office right here behind me in the White House on Monday. The New York Times reports that acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney persuaded President Trump to take the legal route, bring this case to the courts, arguing that since the GOP tax package ended a mandate that you were talking about, Pat, that people without coverage pay a penalty, the Affordable Care Act is no longer valid. Plus, a lawsuit to overturn the ACA will help fulfill Trump's campaign promise Now, the Justice Department got on board and sent a request to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals to get rid of Obamacare. The legal battle is expected to reach as high as the Supreme Court.
Well, if the Fifth Circuit rules it out and the Supreme Court backs them up, what happens next? Is there a plan B? Does the president have a plan?
Yeah, Patty does. That is Plan B. If the High Court rules that the Affordable Care Act is out, then President Trump says they will have a plan that will be far better than Obamacare. Now, the commander-in-chief said Wednesday that he understands the complexity of health care now. He said people are going broke trying to pay for their health care costs, citing that rising costs of premiums is to blame. Now, many Republicans want greater transparency, more choices for consumers, which creates competition and could actually lead to lowering the cost of health care. The White House says that a new plan will be introduced in the next coming months as the Health and Human Services begins to craft it. Now, rest assured, the Trump administration says that millions of Americans that rely on Obamacare will not be without health insurance. In fact, I spoke to a White House official just moments ago. He said that pre-existing conditions will be covered. Again, you heard President Trump say the Republican Party will soon be known as the Party of Health Care, as we now wait, Pat, to see this new plan unveiled in the next few months.
Who's pushing this particular stand of the president? Was that Mick Mulvaney or somebody else?
Yeah, acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney was in the president's ear during what is considered a policy meeting on Monday. Said, hey, look, we need to get on top of this because, as you were mentioning earlier in the show, that health care will definitely be a big topic in the 2020 campaign. And President Trump, the White House, they really want to get ahead of this on the campaign trail over the next year or so.
Ben, keep us informed. It's an important issue. Well, in other news, the immigration system on our southern border is at a breaking point. Thousands of migrants illegally enter the country every day. John Jessup has more on that.
Thanks, Pat. In El Paso Wednesday, Customs and Border Commissioner Kevin McAleenan said they're facing an unprecedented humanitarian and border security crisis. On 2 separate days this week, agents arrested more than 4,000 migrants crossing the border. That's the highest total in 15 years. Right now, they're on track to deal with 100,000 migrants in March alone, putting a strain on Border Patrol facilities packed beyond their capacity. While President Trump is sending a warning to Russia, get out of Venezuela. Moscow backs strongman Nicolas Maduro, while the U.S. is standing by opposition leader Juan Guaido. The president reissued that warning after meeting with Guaido's wife in the Oval Office Wednesday, hearing stories of the suffering in Venezuela and the Maduro regime's arrest of one of Guaido's top aides. Here's CBN's Jenna Browder.
President Trump is calling on Russia to get out of Venezuela, following reports of Russian troops and equipment arriving in the country.
What sort of complications does the Russian involvement now pose?
Russia has to get out.
During a meeting with Fabiana Rosales, wife of Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaido, Trump's message for the Kremlin was clear.
You just said Russia needs to get out. Have you in any way communicated that?
They know. They know very well.
Both he and Vice President Pence reaffirmed their support for Guaido.
Our message very simply is that we're with you. The United States is going to continue to stand with you, stand with your courageous husband, and stand with freedom-loving people in Venezuela until your libertad is restored.
The United States and 50 other countries back Guaido, elected by Venezuela's legislature to replace dictator Nicolas Maduro. Maduro is accused of stealing the recent election. Russia, though, supports the Maduro regime, which is threatening Guaido's friends and family and arrested his top aide in a raid on his home last week. The wife of Roberto Marrero describes what happened.
At 2 a.m., the political forces of Nicolas Maduro entered in a brutal raid in our house. They destroyed our house, our child's room, everything. They planted guns and things, and this has been for 3 hours. It was a nightmare. And after that, they kidnapped him, and we didn't know anything about him for 6 days. So as a family, we are afraid for his life. We haven't have any communication. We have a 7-year-old kid who doesn't know anything.
There have also been attempts on Guaido's life.
We await to warn the world that what we are seeing is a wave of attacks against the president. There's repression, there's prison, and what they want is to attack him.
All this as blackouts rock the country. People are starving and dehydrated, and riots break out in the streets.
Venezuela was a country with tremendous potential and is still a country with tremendous potential. But people are starving, they're being killed, they're being beaten. What's going there is unfathomable to everybody that sees and everybody that gets reports.
And President Trump is refusing to rule out military force against Maduro, saying all options are open, even if Russia doesn't leave the country. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thanks, Jenna. Pat, back to you.
I've said many times, if a thug is terrorizing a neighborhood with armed force and terrorizing the people and taking captives and maybe killing people, then the police department must move and do something, and it takes force to do that. And we haven't ruled out force. We keep saying we won't rule it out, but we've got to do something. Now, if the Russians come in, we've got what's called the Monroe Doctrine. You know, foreign powers stay out of our hemisphere. And so the Russians are coming into our hemisphere, and they know they're violating the Monroe Doctrine. We have every right to get in there and make something happen, but I know we don't want the whole idea of America taking over, because that doesn't play well in Latin America. But the Organization of American States must come together, and we can back them up with all kinds of weapons, with satellite footage, with drones, with all the stuff we've got, without actually being one of the major players. We can be there, but we don't have to put our troops in there. But something has got to be done. Either that they're going to kill Guaido if it keeps up. I mean, you know he'll be assassinated, and it'll be a bloodbath. And we need to stop just making threats and get in there and help him. John?
Pat, video of an 85-year-old pro-life supporter outside a San Francisco Planned Parenthood clinic is going viral. According to the pro-life advocacy group 40 Days for Life, the elderly man named Ron has been leading the campaign in San Francisco for years. Last week, he tried to stop a pro-choice advocate who stole his sign. As you can see, the young man attacked him. The man apparently had been coming around for days. This video is spurring calls to find the attacker. According to the group, Planned Parenthood refused to give police their security footage because they said Ron brought the attack on himself. Well, House Minority Whip Steve Scalise is fighting for legislation protecting babies born after a botched abortion. He's introducing a petition next week forcing a vote on the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act. As Paul Strand explains, Scalise says the petition is needed because Democrats are using House rules to block a vote on the bill.
Last night on the floor, for the 17th time, we asked to bring up the Born Alive Protection Act. For the 17th time, the Democrats refused. There are babies being born alive and then ultimately murdered.
House Pro-Life Caucus leader Chris Smith described one such murder in a Florida abortion clinic.
The clinic owner took the baby, who was gasping for air, cut her umbilical cord, threw her into a biohazard bag, and put the bag in the trash like so much garbage.
Not only are pro-life lawmakers prevented from ending this practice, they can't even get a vote.
This is the height of shamefulness. It is absolutely an abomination that this is going on and that we're having to have this argument in the United States today.
But Democrats are in charge of the House these days and won't let the Born Alive Protection Act come to the House floor for a debate and vote.
Meanwhile, in the states, some lawmakers fear the Supreme Court could overturn Roe v. Wade and legalize abortion nationwide. So states like New York, Rhode Island, and others are pushing radical abortion legislation to keep such practices legal. So is Illinois.
They have introduced the Reproductive Health Act, which, according to one abortion group, could cement Illinois as the Midwest abortion oasis.
Melissa Cifuentes has been fighting a similar law in Rhode Island.
We are called to use our voice to speak the truth on behalf of innocent lives that are sacred and are worthy of our protection.
Halt this bloodlust and work to protect unborn and born babies rather than provide a killing oasis.
These legislators are pleading with Americans to call on their Congress members to sign the discharge petition for the Born Alive Protection Act. If that gets 218 signatures, Speaker Nancy Pelosi has to let the bill come to the floor. Paul Strand, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Thanks, Paul. Pat, back to you.
Can you imagine the Democrats running on a platform like we favor infanticide? Can you believe they'll come before the American people saying, look, we want to bankrupt the country. We want to cut out airplanes and automobiles and fossil fuel. We want to run our, well, who knows what they want to run the generators on. And we also favor infanticide. Can you imagine a congressman standing on that platform? What kind of insanity has taken over that party? My father was a leader of the Democratic Party. I was a Democrat till I was about 55 years old. It was a wonderful party. All of a sudden, they've gone crazy.